um, help us confirm if you can actually see and hear us from your end, okay? And also if you can actually view our screens. So by sending us a thumbs up in the chat box, we would really appreciate that one. Thank you so much. How's the weather there, Nat?
It's lovely. It's like under 30 degrees today, so no complaints. And you guys?
It's kind of hot here actually. That's why I'm wearing
Oh
like
no.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
it's
very
been
sensible.
5 days already since I mean almost a week already since we're experiencing that one. But yeah, still doing fine
Mm,
here.
yeah, hope it breaks soon. Very humid too, right?
Yeah, it is. It is really.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Marna, for confirming. Timothy, Dinora, thank you so much. Oh, Rashido, good morning. Good morning. Abu Bakar, good morning. Theo, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, cool. So, okay, it's amazing. Nat, do you have? Can you see the? Do you have the take control button from your end?
Let me have a look.
Yep. Would you be able to control the screens,
Yes,
perhaps?
I can do. There you go.
All
Oh, is
right,
that gonna
cool.
work? There we go. Yeah,
All right. Okay, that's amazing. So I'll take it back, okay? All
glad
right,
it's
cool.
working.
So, yep, I think we can start now, Nat. So, thank you so much, everyone. So, welcome to EIT's Open Virtual Week, day two. Okay, I emphasize this one, day two. Okay, together with me is Natalie Ding, our digital learning manager. Okay, so little bit of housekeeping. So guys, we want you to have a laser focused attention on this webinar today. So if you can actually see on your screens right now how to turn off those notifications so that you will not be disturbed while focusing on the discussions today. Okay, so if you do have any questions as well for our presenter, you can post that one in the Q&A section of on the right on the top of your screens. Just post your questions there, and Natalie and I will be answering that one to you after the presentation. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation. All right. Okay. All right. So again, today's topic that would be effective communication for engineers. This will be presented to us by again Natalie Deng, our digital learning manager, and hosted by yours truly, Marvin Yu. Okay, one of the course advisors of EIT based in the Philippines. Okay, so for common questions, for those who are, most of the time I do encounter this one who will be asking about the copy of the slides and of course the video recording. So this will be sent to you. Okay, for those who have registered, this will be sent to you after like few days after the webinar. So that would be, please expect it to be on your email on the 14th by Monday and 15th 15th Tuesday. Okay, so please monitor your junk mails and junk mails as well. So for those who have attended until the end of the presentation, there will be a certificate of attendance. Okay, for those who have attended and who has until the end of this webinar. Okay, so I will let Natalie Ding, introduce herself more for as a presenter today. Nat, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marvin, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. I hope that the things that we go through today will be useful, and you might learn something and a little bit get a little bit of context for communication for engineers. So I am going to take control of these slides. We go. Okay, excellent. So everyone can see this slide up of me. Good. Okay. So I've been at EIT for close to 9 years now. I've worked in a few different areas. I started as a vet learning support officer and then moved into higher education, ran that for a little while. had a couple of kids, and then I've come back and now I look after digital learning, which is a few different things. So I do some work with AI, I do some work with our short courses, quite a bit there, as well as some teaching and learning adjacent work as well. So I've got a few different uh, areas of expertise in EIT, and I've seen a lot of the student journey, helped students through their studies all the way through to graduation, and then seen a lot of the back end as well. So the things that go on to make, EIT's courses work for students, as well as the struggles that our students tend to have, and our students are all over the globe, of course. My own background is quite varied as well. So I've worked in the construction industry, as many people in Western Australia have, doing document control and quality assurance admin and things like that. Been off to mine sites, and then I've studied linguistics and a little bit of digital learning design as well. So quite a random bucket of experience, but I hope that I'll be able to bring, a little bit of that to you guys today. I would love to take credit for the wonderful slides that I'm going to walk you through, but I can't. They were done by Edwina Ross. So should there be anything that you'd like to ask a little bit more about in this session, let me know. And if I can't answer myself, then I'll make sure that it gets directed to Edwina and she'll curate a perfect response for you. And we're very happy to sort of go through this kind of thing with our future students, with our current students. Communication is pretty integral. So yeah, very happy to have you here. Okay. So let me first get a bit of an idea of who's in the room. We've got quite a few attendees today. Who has worked or who's led teams before? If I could get you guys to put your hands up or just a thumbs up in the chat. Give you a couple of seconds. Good. Okay. So who here has led engineering teams before, or even project teams if you're not engineers yet? Thanks, Timothy. Great. I think we've still got a few people coming in. Excellent, Atta. Okay, cool. All right. So the thing that I want to impress upon you first is what makes effective communication. So your message to your audience, that's the people who are listening to you, needs to be interpreted accurately. So what makes effective communication really? How do we ensure the fidelity, the accurateness of that message that we're conveying when we're communicating with other people? Great, we've got a few more hands up in the chat as well. So communication can be considered successful when all the parties involved, that's the sender and the receiver or the listener, assign very similar meanings to the message. So that means that you need to find ways to minimize the noise of your communication, of your messaging. What do we mean by noise here, right? So that could be physical noise, so things like a background, and it might be that you're on a mine site and there's trucks going and the person can't hear you. It could be as simple as that. But it could also be things like psychological noise. So let's say somebody is annoyed at you for a decision you've made in a meeting, and then you send them an email, and the way that that person reads your email might not be quite the way that you intended it. They might read more aggression into it just because of the experience you've had with them recently. So that sort of psychological noise is definitely a factor. You've got semantic noise, which is using things like jargon or slang that might, interfere with that message that you're trying to communicate, or even cultural noise, which are things like gesture and idioms, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So all of these sort of outside factors, these variables can influence the efficacy of the communication of your message. So as engineers, obviously the messages that you're communicating are pretty critical. So it's really important that we find ways to minimize that. The sender and the receiver both have responsibilities to contribute to effective communication, but generally speaking, it's going to be the sender that's ultimately accountable That's arguable because there's a lot that can go wrong on both sides. But you do need to prepare your message well and do whatever you can, whatever is in your power to make sure that you are communicating effectively and ensuring that your audience is receptive and engaged. Can anyone tell me how they think they'll know if their message is received well? How can you tell when you're having an interaction with someone? How do you know if they've received your message as you intended? Chuck your responses in the chat, guys. Don't be shy. Anyone? How do you know if your message has been received as you intended? Yep, beautiful. So well-channeled communication, a well-received note. When they ask relevant questions, excellent. When they giving room for feedback, and when you receive feedback, absolutely. Yeah, really good answers, guys. Thank you. And how they respond back to you. Yeah, both verbally and non-verbally as well. You can tell if somebody's engaged in the way that they're speaking to you, if they're receptive. And these are things that you can do as the recipient of that message as well, right? So a successful project, and they're not always as straightforward as we'd like, requires really good communication, and it relies on the team's commitment to having good, effective communication. So when people are committed, they're more likely to be positive and receptive for communication. If you've ever done project management, you'd know that buy-in is a massive part of that, and ensuring that all the members of your team are really I guess they've got skin in the game, to use an idiom, but everybody is committed to, achieving those outcomes and the goals of the project. And there's a lot of communication that goes on to, get these things achieved. And this could be like a huge, construction project or a, safety thing, or it could just be a project for an assignment that you're doing at uni or with us. There's no difference in the importance of the communication within the team and how it sort of functions. So everyone in the team needs to contribute. And as a receiver, there's a few things that you can do to facilitate communication. So listening actively, which a few of you have beautifully touched on, so giving feedback and things like that. Does anyone else know what active listening looks like? What does it look like when you are actively listening to someone? Chuck it in the chat for me. What does active listening look like? Is it someone scrolling through their phone while they're talking to you? Probably not. Paying attention with your five senses. Yeah, thanks, Felix. Consistently seeking clarity, giving someone your full attention, not being distracted, engagement. Yeah, great answers, guys. So some other things, reflecting on someone's questions. Um, Rashado said active listening is lending one's ears and speaking less. Absolutely. Looking at their face. Yep, eye contact is a good one. Being silent when they're talking. Yep, having respect for when that person is speaking, and I can't understate the importance of respect in communication. Asking questions, avoiding judgment, always avoiding being arrogant, which can, happen. Even if you're right, it's never a good communication strategy to be, arrogant or impolite, really. Yeah. To understand rather than comment. Yeah. It's easier said than done, right? We sort of all know what good listening looks like, but in the moment when you're having heated discussions, it can definitely be challenging. So it's something that we all have to continuously try and be aware of and ensure that we're doing whatever we can to, get there. Asking questions when it's necessary and not just to be argumentative is a good one, and giving constructive feedback. And constructive feedback is also an art form, I think. It is very, very important as engineers, that you feel like you can and know how to give feedback into projects, whether that's as project managers and leaders or as members of bigger teams. Your ideas could be the one that, the ones that make a real difference. They could be the ones that save lives, that save projects, that save a lot of money, right? So, it's important to feel confident in your own ability to communicate clearly and, appropriately. Being tactful, is very important too. There's been so many examples. I could go on for days about all of the different engineering disasters and things that have happened. You've got the Challenger space shuttle and so many others. I'll give you actually a link if you guys want to go read about a couple if you haven't already seen them. But a lot of these come down to communication, and maybe it's communication, like technical communication, so somebody using the wrong unit of measurement, or maybe it's project managers not listening to the experts in their team, which is where you have buy-in and respect and arrogance and things like that. But it can be, smaller things, right? I've worked for a company and a truck tipped over halfway through the desert because the engineers who recommended against overloading this vehicle were not listened to. And again, these things happen all the time and they get resolved eventually, but they cost money, they cost time, and it doesn't make for a very good working environment, right? So ensuring that if you're in charge of a team, you make it a I guess I want to say safe space, but really a safe space to allow your team members to give you that feedback, to take it on board, and to not bite their head off. To use another idiom, is pretty important. But also as a team member to know that you can offer that, and as experts in your fields, right? You guys, as engineers, will have an amazing set of skills, experience. The longer you are in the industry, the more you have, and it's incredibly valuable. Like Amade's just said, listening to the ideas of everyone and having respect for them. That's absolutely right. As Edwina has noted here, 1 out of 5 projects fails because of ineffective communication. And while your skills as an engineer, your technical skills might get you a job, it's going to be your communication skills that get you promoted, that get you put in charge of projects, in charge of teams, right? Especially if it means the success of those projects. So over here, we've got the 7 C's of communication. So we're going to go around these. Before we do, I'll just read them out quickly to you. So we've got correct, complete, concrete, concise, coherent, courteous, and clear. Have a look at this for a second, guys, and tell me if you think any two of those contradict each other. I'll give you 30 seconds to have a look. Which two of these elements, these 7 C's, might compete a little bit with each other in the real world? While you guys are thinking, Arija, I'll have to have a look into that. I'm not familiar with it, unfortunately, but I will get back to you, or we'll send out some extra stuff with the slides. So of these 7 here, everyone, which two do you think might clash? So Karel said clear and courteous. Yep, it's definitely one that can be difficult, because if you are being clear to the point of being blunt, then it tips over into courteous, right? If anyone can think of times when they've really needed to hammer the message home, like get their message through, and the politeness of that message has perhaps fallen by the wayside. I'm sure a lot of us have been responsible for, doing that from time to time. There's another one that I'm thinking of here. Correct, complete, concrete, concise, coherent, courteous, and clear. Any two of these that you think might battle with each other a little bit? Yeah, that's it, Karel. Complete and concise. Because how can you give all of the information required, but also make it really brief, right? Like you've got a Twitter post versus a blog, and they're sometimes in direct opposition. Absolutely. Finding the balance between giving enough information to the right people at the right time and not providing too little information is definitely a skill. It's something that everyone works on for their whole life. Some people are really good at it. Um, I definitely know that I fall too far to the complete side than the concise side, but it's good to be aware of how you communicate as well, and that way you can adapt. You can adapt your communication to different scenarios and different groups of people, and hopefully improve. So let's have a look at each one. Yeah. Sorry. There we go. So starting with correct, right? Your information that you communicate has to be accurate, has to be factual. We're going to talk about AI a little bit later, because the correctness of the information that you're communicating as engineers is absolutely paramount. The telling people the wrong thing, obviously the consequences for that in your field are quite dramatic, or can be. So that's really up there. Having complete information is also pretty important. Being able to discern what makes the information complete to what people, like I was saying. Concrete, is it reliable? Is it solid information? Is it from good sources? Again, we'll touch on AI a little bit later. Concise is ensuring that you don't waffle and ramble, right? You don't want to go off on tangents if you're, well, too much, right? If you're talking to someone and you know that they've only got 10 minutes to have a chat about a project, how do you make sure that you're hitting on those key points, right? Are you coherent? Is your messaging, is your communication making sense? Are you going back to what you are there for, what the aim of your communication is, or what the goals of your communication are? That is beyond, just verbal communication. That's emails that you send. That's assignments that you might write if you choose to study with us. Making sure that you're staying on topic and relevant is a really important factor in good communication. I can't understate the importance of being courteous. If you want to have people, participate in good communication with you, have buy-in, be willing participants in your communication, then being courteous is a really good way to achieve that. Obviously, building those relationships and having some emotional intelligence does not hurt in that regard, and being clear. And clarity is multifaceted, right? It's not just the clarity of your voice, it's the speed at which you talk, and it's all of those things that I talked about earlier in terms of noise. So, not using too much jargon or acronyms or things that might confuse people, but that means knowing your audience as well, right? So, you would speak to a subject matter expert or an engineer in a very technical field one way, but you wouldn't speak to, say, a journalist in that way because they wouldn't have the same context. So understanding who your audience is a really important part of determining what makes your communication clear. There are other C's that are closely related to these. So being coherent, so structuring your information logically and making it easy to follow. So if you're giving a summary, like an update at a meeting on a project, making sure that there's sort of logical flow to what you're presenting and that everyone else, if they're unfamiliar with it especially, can follow it. Being correct, which is kind of like being, a little bit like the concrete one. So that's being accurate. So knowing your stuff and knowing when you don't know, right? And being prepared to admit it. So if you aren't sure about something, not bluffing to try and get through the meeting or the, whatever you're doing, to actually be prepared, I guess. To be upfront about things that might be missing, what you don't know. There's definitely a temptation sometimes for a lot of people to just say what they can to get through it. And that's when things get missed, right? And sometimes in engineering, very important things, we'll deal with this later. This can be somebody else's problem. I'd urge you not to do that. I'm sure some of you have probably already learned that lesson or have had experience with other people doing that. And yeah, it doesn't end well. And being clear, which we've also got here, which is, using plain English and avoiding those acronyms or jargon. So you might know what a P&ID is, great. The person that you're talking to may have no idea. Maybe they're completely new to a field of engineering or a site or a project or whatever the case is. If you start assuming that they understand what you're talking about, they might not have the communication skills or might not be comfortable, right? Asking you for corrections. Um, or to give them, a definition and things like that. And that's when things can also slip through. The concrete information here, it's factual information with evidence, which we've talked about. So um, like Dwayne's put here, this doesn't mean to shut down debate and discussion, because that's obviously really important as well at the right time and place. Not every single bit of communication needs to be a full-on debate, but making sure that you can have those discussions when it's appropriate to find ways forward. And going back to respect, which I think has been mentioned in the chat, is really key. And when it comes to being courteous, can anybody think of experiences they might have had where you've either shut down communication or somebody has shut down communication with you because of maybe perceived courtesy issues, or someone was being a bit blunt? Has anyone had any sort of real world experiences with that? Yeah, thanks, Charles and Mano. I think it's human nature, right? Like, where nobody wants to be treated disrespectfully. Um, and so when it happens, it can be really hard to be receptive of communication. We all have to work with challenging people from time to time. It's just a fact of life. You're not going to be best mates with everyone. Ultimately, there's jobs that need to get done, and finding ways to center yourself and have still effective communication, even if it isn't your favorite communication or person to communicate with, is a really important part of just, general work life, of managing projects, of being involved in projects. Yeah, Mano, disrespect and patronization, I guess, is definitely one that it's destructive, right? It's destructive to good communication. So yeah, pretty critical. How about, of these seven, which ones do you guys find the most difficult for yourselves? Like, which one do you struggle with the most? So I was saying earlier, being concise for me is something that I try and be aware of.
For me, sometimes being courteous.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite challenging for me as well. So I'm training myself to be more courteous in terms of communicating with people. So although I've been in sales already, but I'm still, you know, still coping up with that one. But yeah, I think it's very important to be courteous, especially with communicating with,
Yeah,
this
absolutely,
thing.
Marvin. Yeah, and
Sorry, I
courtesy.
was actually
No,
listening.
no, I appreciate your input. I think you're right. Courtesy is hard sometimes, and especially in global working environments, whether it's online or remotely or email, or you're on a site in the middle of nowhere. Like Joshua said, understanding your audience and choosing the right words, it can be really nuanced. And sometimes you just won't know. You won't have their cultural context. You won't know that they've misinterpreted something until sometimes it's too late, right? Email's a tricky one, right? How making sure that the way you communicate over emails is, I guess, appropriate. You don't want to be completely cold, but you don't want to be over familiar. You want to make sure that you're meeting all these other things. It sounds simple, right? Like we all communicate every day in our lives, but when you're working and you're working with a really diverse set of people, it can definitely throw a spanner into the works, to use yet another idiom. But yeah, it's not always the easiest. And yeah, Carol, when you've got some challenging customers, I think, or clients or subcontractors or whatever it is, it definitely takes some self-control to make sure that you're hitting that courteous part of communication. Yeah, for sure, guys. Great. Coherence is a tricky one, and being concise. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard, right? This is not the easiest thing in the world to get right every time, and you won't. Nobody is getting communication right 100% of the time every time. Um, there are things that you can do if you're aware of it. It helps if you're aware of where your I guess not flaws, that's a bit harsh, where you could improve, then you can focus on it and you can get better at it. And that's all we can do, right? Okay. So what are some barriers now that we've sort of talked about the things that you should be doing? What are some of the hurdles that can prevent you from reaching that audience, from making sure of the fidelity of your message? So going into things unprepared, right, with very little thought or planning. So this could be that you are flat out with a million other things, and then you know you've got a meeting coming up and you don't prepare to it. You don't read the agenda. You haven't looked at your action items from the last meeting, right? You haven't got updates on your projects, whatever the case is. It's a little bit disrespectful, or it can be, to come into things unprepared. It just shows that you don't have that respect for the other people's time who are at that meeting. And honestly, it can be a waste of time because nobody wants to be called into, endless meetings and endless emails and discussions when if everyone was just a little bit better prepared and taken a bit of time out, they could communicate more effectively. Real world happens, of course, things come up, and we can never all be perfect at this, but it's definitely a barrier to things flowing as ideally as we would like them to. Using the wrong mode. So that means choosing the wrong method of communication, right? And we have options, a myriad of options available to us now. You can just walk over to someone's desk and have a chat to them. And sometimes that is the best option. But it could be an email or a phone call or a Teams meeting or screen sharing, or it might be a set up meeting with a set time and a whole bunch of stakeholders, right? Choosing the right mode of communication is something that, again, you learn with time. So deciding, yeah, actually, this is a quick discussion. It doesn't need to be recorded anywhere. That's probably a phone call or an in-person chat. But if it's, say, a project update or, something really critical, then you probably want that in person. You want that recorded. You don't want to have endless emails if you know it's going to be a really complex subject when it could just be resolved by a couple of in-person meetings. So something I'm sure that you've all been part of, or a lot of you have been part of, is the wrong mode or choice of communication. Bad timing is another tricky one. Sometimes when we know we need an answer for something and we just want to get it, right? And being conscious of the person that we're communicating with, of their time and what they're trying to, get through in their own day is important too. So not grabbing people when they're halfway out the door or in the middle of lunch, and it happens definitely in many, many workplaces, and it's tempting to do because it'll only take 1 second, but just being conscious of trying to avoid bad timing. Again, it comes down to respect, and I'm sure nobody likes it when they're interrupted when they're in the middle of something either. Making sure that you ask people, do you have a minute for this, before just demanding 20 minutes of their time, right? That can be all it takes sometimes. We have just introduced in Australia some laws around contacting people out of hours, and it's definitely not universal, right? So the right to switch off, I think it's called, because yeah, people don't want to be bothered on the weekends or after hours without their consent. Essentially, they don't want to be dragged into work. And in an ideal world, that would be the case everywhere. But of course, in engineering especially, things just keep happening and you can't always switch off. So setting expectations with the people that you work with as well is pretty important wherever you can, right? Um, Accents and like competency in English is, I have huge admiration first for anyone that's bilingual. I'm not, with my great regrets. So yeah, it's definitely a barrier for communication. If you're working in a place that is, that English is a language of communication, it's sort of you have a responsibility to yourself, and you owe it to yourself to try and improve your English as much as you can. There are so many tools out there, Duolingo, of course, but beyond that, there's a million different resources you can use to help improve your English, to give yourself the best chance of communicating effectively and not having any of your really important messages lost in translation. Um, and that can go other ways as well. If you're working in another country and you know you're going to have to be speaking Russian or Farsi or whatever it happens to be, you may also want to try and learn that so that you can communicate with the people that you need to. So it's, we often talk about English as the be all and end all, but it's most certainly not. Um, but in professionally and in engineering, it often will be. So yeah, definitely something that you can try and focus on and help yourself with your communication. Being disinterested is another one that's really important. Being focused, again, not always the easiest thing to do, to stay focused when someone is droning on or absolutely boring you to tears, and people notice, right? Not everyone, but it's certainly apparent when somebody isn't actually interested in the conversation. And when you're not interested in the conversation, people often can pick it up. So if you don't care either about what you're presenting, then your audience won't care either. And being unobservant is the final one here. Again, this is something that you can develop skills in, right? So missing cues from your audience can make it really challenging to communicate effectively, and then they become disinterested, right? So you need to guide your audience through the conversation, draw them back in. There's a million different things that you can do to try and elicit that engagement, I guess. And that's tiring sometimes, right? It's not always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes you won't have the energy for it, but if it's an important message that you're trying to communicate, it's probably worth doing. And getting that feedback, right? And we mentioned it earlier from a few of you, that feedback from your recipient of your message, your listener, right? That's going to help you in guiding your discussion, um, and then deciding how to remedy it. So on that topic, has anyone ever had to pivot, like mid discussion? So whether you're presenting something or even just talking to a friend or family, has anyone had to pivot their message midway through because it's not landing as you expected? Put it in the chat for me. No need to like put your mics on or anything. Yeah, Anthony. Yeah, sure, Charles. So essentially, have you ever been communicating with anyone, whether in a meeting, with colleagues, with friends, family, and you've had to change direction, right? Because you have realized that the message that you're trying to communicate isn't landing properly. You can think of a time that that's ever happened. If anyone wants to share, if no one wants to share, that's okay too. Yeah, Charles, absolutely. I'm sure you can all think of times it's happened, right? That is you observing your audience, right, and adjusting. And it it can be challenging as well to do. You have to be quite aware, quite present in that communication. But it's a skill, and again, there's ways to, like I said, readjust the conversation and bring people back into it.
Maybe we can ask someone from the attendees, to speak with us directly. Talk to us about his experience, perhaps. Nat, what do you think?
Yeah, if anyone's willing,
Yeah,
put your hand
just
up
can
or
you raise
feel,
your hands up? Yep,
yeah.
and then we'll. Yep.
Rochedo, I said in a meeting where you get the idea that you and the audience are not on the same wavelength. Yeah, definitely with friends. It can happen for sure when people are not familiar with what you're talking about, or maybe you're really passionate about something and you realize the person you're talking to couldn't care less, right? Or, or vice versa. Anyone want to share with their mic? No pressure though. You can also just type it out for me in the chat. I love reading your stories.
Yep.
Yeah, Charles? Marvin, can we let Charles have the mic?
Sorry, sure. Just a sec. Charles, right? Let me see. Okay, Charles. Okay, Charles, please turn on your mic.
I have. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Sure. Sure. Thanks, guys. Yeah, there are certain challenges that we usually face, particularly due to accent, when sometimes in workplaces where you have different cultures, different people speaking several languages, and there are certain times again when you tend to speak broken English for someone to understand. That's more specific in workplaces and with family members as well. There is now a way of doing it. I usually have to change the mode. For example, when I'm supposed to do a verbal presentation to the team, then tend to either opt to write an email or text messages. So yeah, those are some of the experiences which we usually encounter in terms of communication as engineers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Charles. Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely things that you can do to help reinforce your message when you're communicating, right? So maybe if you have a meeting, you follow it up with dot points in an email, right? Where you can reinforce what you've been communicating. Um, that sort of thing can help clear up any misunderstanding. It really helps people go back to it, and then you know that you can feel reassured that you've had effective communication there, especially when it's about important things, right? Mano noted that when you speak passionately about an interest and the listener doesn't share the same interest at all, it's heartbreaking. I'm sure it's happened to all of us. But being able to observe your listener and get the feedback is a painful but important part of having that communication interaction. Great. And on that topic, very relevantly, we'll
And
move
yeah, yeah.
on to oh sorry,
Yeah. Thank you,
Charles.
Charles. Thank you, Charles, for sharing.
Yes, thank you very much, Charles. Great. So emotional intelligence might seem very, fluffy, soft skill stuff, right? But developing your emotional intelligence to help you improve your communication is definitely something that you can focus on to just generally, better yourself as a human, and also in the way that you work and interact with others. Um, Engaging audiences is difficult, right? Ask any of our lecturers, especially when the topics are really dry or very difficult to understand, as you guys, I'm sure, have dealt with. What helps you become a really good communicator is lots of practice, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and that might mean more public speaking, more presentations, or just exposing yourself to those kind of environments that you'll struggle in and then working through them. So successful communication involves an attentive audience, so one that really listens and responds just as you hope they would. And that's the ideal world, right? So what can you do to sort of improve your emotional intelligence? It um, sorry, I'm just thinking there's a lot of ways you can, right? There are other people that you can watch. If you know really good communicators, I would encourage you to observe them, see how they interact with others, see how they listen, how they actively listen, right? But there are things you can read, there are blogs, there are videos, there's a million different ways that you can learn to improve it. Being more emotionally intelligent makes you more self-aware, right? Makes you be able to critique yourself, to find those areas which you can improve and better, and they help you understand your own strengths and weaknesses so you can, you know, do away with those weaknesses. And we're not all going to be perfect at everything, right? Not everybody is going to be a brilliant public speaker. But if you know that you struggle with it, then you can go and find strategies to improve that and help yourself gain confidence. You know, there's a million other little things that are in that realm as well. If you find that you're too serious, for example, like really straight-faced in every single communication that you have, and if you're aware of that, right, you might want to find ways to lighten it up. And whether that's things like, do I need to put cartoons in here, or it's just relaxing a little, like finding out why you might interact that way with people. You know, are you really focused on getting your message through? Is that the only thing that matters, right? Helping you understand human behavior and detect changes in it is very nuanced. It's not as natural as you think it would be, especially when we have such diverse communities of practice and working. So I just encourage you all to continuously look at it, be aware of it. So if you have an audience, for example, that is lacking in confidence, and you'll see it if you choose to study with us, you'll maybe go into a unit and you'll have a very quiet class and nobody wants to speak up. Nobody wants to contribute, right? That's not unusual, yeah, especially when we're not confident in a topic or a subject, or when we know nothing about a project that's happening if it's a world of work, right? Having the confidence to say, okay, I'm going to speak up and get it wrong, that can be an absolute blessing for other people who are there, because I guarantee you're not the only one that's thinking that, right? It also helps the person who's presenting, teaching, communicating. It helps them feel better too, right? Because if you can help support the teaching, asking questions, never any bad questions, right? Especially in the classroom, you know, it can really make a much nicer learning environment for everyone. Once you can sort of get a handle on these, that self-awareness, self-critique, being able to look at your own behavior, your own interactions, and how you can improve them, you know, shoot for the stars, because really it's limitless, and everybody wants to be a beautiful, perfect communicator, right? It's a lifelong thing. Finding ways to do that, highly recommend. Okay, got some extra tips for you. So what makes a good communicator? Practice, right? That practice makes perfect. Cliche. It's there, it's true. Like I said, putting yourself in situations and, you know, environments you're not super comfortable in, that's going to help you get to that level, work through it, you know, go through the embarrassment and the awkwardness, and I guarantee at the end you'll have learned new things and you'll be better for it. If you're an anxious communicator, try and be well prepared. So have all the information ready to go, make your notes, practice with your friends, practice with AI if you need to, because, you know, even that can help you these days. Get to know your team and the people that you're interacting with, your stakeholders, your colleagues, your fellow students if you're studying. You don't need to be best mates with everyone, but you should be engaged and kind and respectful. And, you know, hopefully you put that energy out and that's the energy that people return to you. It will not always be the case, but at least then you'll know you've done as much as you can to facilitate positive interactions, right? Being tolerant of difference and embracing diversity. We have students from all over the world. I guarantee that everyone in this in this meeting, probably from, you know, a myriad of different countries. If you want to put your countries that you're from in the chat, feel free. I'm just curious to see where you're all
Yeah,
from.
I was about to ask as well if you can
Yeah.
actually put your countries in the chat box. We would really appreciate that one. Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Marvin.
guys.
Yeah, got Nigeria,
From Nigeria,
Taiwan,
Taiwan. Amazing. All right, cool.
Namibia. I'm in Perth, Australia. Fiji, Philippines, Zimbabwe,
Philippines. Okay,
Botswana.
that's good.
Yeah, more
Hi, Amy.
Egypt,
Okay, that's
Uganda,
good.
UK,
Zimbabwe.
Ghana, South Africa, Zambia, Cameroon, Solomon Islands, New Zealand,
Oh my God.
more Zimbabwe, and Ghana, Botswana. Yeah,
Botswana.
absolutely beautiful cross section of humanity here.
Exactly, exactly.
DR Congo, Rwanda. Yeah,
South Africa,
yeah.
Nigeria.
You can see, right, the huge diversity that we've got in our student body. Ghana, Kenya. There's very few countries in the world that we don't have or haven't had students from. India, lovely. And that means that when you're communicating with each other, right, Mauritius, you've got people who speak multiple different languages, who have multiple different cultural contexts. Maybe they are living, born, worked in their country. Maybe they've traveled to 10 different countries, and you'll find that with engineering a lot, of course. It's having that tolerance and embracing the diversity is only going to improve the outcomes that you're getting from your communication. You know, at worst, you maybe learn something, and at best, you get to explore a whole nother facet of humanity, right? You maybe get to see things from a completely different perspective through, you know, language. I'm a linguist, right? That's my bachelor's, so I hugely appreciate the different angles that we all get from our cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and I just think that you guys should take advantage of that. And I'm sure many of you do. So yeah, it can be really powerful when it comes to problem solving in engineering. You know, you've got a world of different applications. And so talking to your colleagues, your peers, and drawing out that experience, like really finding out how solutions have been reached for all different kind of problems is just going to make you better engineers. Using your team's expertise on that note when you're communicating is really important. So identifying sort of where the skills are in your team and who's good at what is a really good way to make sure your communication is targeted, and getting people's buy-in, knowing that they're appreciated, that they're valued, right? Checking for understanding, so continuing to ask, do you get it? Does anything make sense? Does it not make sense? If there's anything I've said today that doesn't make sense, let me know and I'll try and clarify. Using humor, if you're good at it, like Dwayne said, you don't. There's a line, right, between being funny and being, you know, crass or tacky or hurtful, God forbid, or offensive. Um, yeah, it's something you probably need to tread carefully with, especially when you have so many different cultures. But, you know, if you know you're a funny person, absolutely use it. It's always appreciated. And then targeting the audience that you need, right? So that means not inviting every single person to every single conversation. You don't need to ask, you know, people that are irrelevant and can't contribute to contribute to discussions just to make them feel better. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. But conversely, making sure that you have the right people in the room so that decisions can get made, so that you've got the right expertise. If you know that expertise doesn't exist in a room, can you get it from somewhere? Can you get that input from someone? So again, something that you will be able to figure out. On to AI in communication. So I do a little bit around AI. I'm by no means an expert, but it is an inevitable part of our current reality. It's not going anywhere. I would love to hear how AI is being used in engineering, just because I'm also very curious. If you want to put anything in the chat about how AI is, how you're using it in your work, in your careers, in your studies, feel free to chuck it in the chat. You need to be careful, right? Be careful not just with your own data, what you're uploading, what you're providing, what you're communicating with AI, because it's not necessarily as black box technology as it used to be, but it's still, you know, you can't see where that data is going. You can't see what they're using to train their models. So being very mindful about proprietary data, about your own data, identifying data, what you throw into AIs should be pretty important to you. You need to learn to prompt well. Again, not as much as you did a year ago, but still make sure you know what you're asking if you want to get the right outcomes. Yeah, using it for language translation, absolutely. It's a brilliant use of it.
I'm guilty of this one as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are. And you know what? If it makes life easier and helps you bridge that communication gap, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Especially if you're someone who wants to get the information really like what that particular person means, you need to have that, especially if it's coming from countries that are not using English as their main language. So, yep.
Yeah. Like Carol said, you might not lose your job to AI, but if you don't use it, if you don't learn to use it and use it effectively and engage with it, then you are at risk of, you know, of your risk of losing your job really, or you know, the world changing and not keeping up with it. And it's hard because AI is changing ridiculously quickly, right? It's very hard to stay on top of it all, but you know, try and engage wherever you can. And remember,
That's
remember
true.
that, yeah, remember that you guys are the experts. So AI is still very prone to hallucination. Cross-check your AIs. Use your ChatGPT, sure, customize it with instructions if you want, but also have a look at DeepSeek, have a look at Gemini, at Claude, at Copilot. Different models are good for different things. And I would strongly caution anyone from using it for any engineering diagrams, calculations, coding. I know it's brilliant for, but even then it can make mistakes and it will put rubbish into your code. Always check your work, check everything that you are doing with AI. There have already been instances of engineering issues and failures in the real world because of data being generated using AI tools. So you don't want to be the person that has to say, oh yeah, actually I didn't do that work myself, I used AI, because it's not a conversation I imagine anyone wants to have. Yeah, there's options like Carol said, to keep your data a bit more secure. We use Copilot for some things, and we also have our own models actually that we develop in-house at EIT, which we have just started using in a course. Yeah, using it for definitions, using it for clarification. If you're dealing with something new and you just want to really understand it at a bit more depth, AI can be really good for that, like a tutor bot kind of thing. So definitely for those reasons, to help you understand things better, but cross-check, right? When you're writing with AI, make sure you keep your own voice, yeah, because it can still be a little bit unemotional, or not even unemotional. It sound very boring, right? And you don't want your communications to come across that way. So let's say you're doing a presentation, you get AI to write the whole script for you. It's not going to sound authentic. And maybe in some cases that doesn't matter, right? But if you want to be seen as a good communicator, just be careful, right? It's changing all the time. It's getting better all the time. But yeah, just try and stay up to date with what you can and use it effectively and ethically. Dwayne put this one in last time. It's the Gunning Fog Index. It's a readability test for English writing. Have a look at it. There's a PDF there. I won't go into depth because you can have a look at it yourselves. But if you want to test how the readability is of your writing, have a look at that. And I think that's probably all. I do want to say Mano's put in the chat about using AI to create a starting point on ISO policies. That I absolutely support. But using AI to brainstorm, to help to organize your ideas. And when we go back to those seven points in that circle, right, using it to help organize your thoughts, clarity. If you know you've got to go into a meeting and you just want to make sure that your structure is good of what you're going to talk about, AI is brilliant at all of that stuff, especially when you're the one giving it the wording and it's just helping you organize, right? Yeah, you will all know in your own careers what is really beneficial. But yeah, trial and error, check your work. I think that is all. Is there any other questions that anybody had?
Yes. We still have a few minutes though. So for those who are interested in, raising their questions to Miss Nat here, please feel free to post it in the chat box. Okay. Or the Q&A session if you want to. Right. So yeah, definitely I'm a user of AI and I love that. AI is an effective tool. A tool. Okay. For me, it's just a tool. So
Yeah, it
yeah.
should be a tool, right? AI is just going to mirror what we put into it. It's just a reflection of all of the data that humans have already created that we continue to feed to it. It's not its own sentient life form yet, right? So knowing the limitations of AI are just as important as knowing how to use it.
That is true. So we
Mm.
have Carol Hill. It's just American style that can be irritating at times.
Do you mean the American style of AI?
AI. Hey, Carol, would you
There's,
like to share this information with us? I can discuss
yeah.
this with us. We still have a few minutes though.
Mhm. The sheer volume, right, of stuff that AI has been trained on is majorly in English, right? And it's going to have its biases in there. Something to be aware of is that whatever AI is spitting out, it has been disproportionately trained on English and a lot of American content, scraped from the millions of parts of the web. And yeah. So it's always gonna give you that back, unfortunately.
That's true. Okay.
Okay.
So guys, please, if you do have questions, please post it in the chat box so that Miss Nat here can answer them for you. Well, I believe Natalie here mentioned a while ago about leadership, who's been into the leadership. So if you're interested in leadership courses, we do offer our diploma in leadership and management. We also have our advanced diploma in leadership and management if you're into someone who's advancing your skills in that particular area. And we also have our professional certificate course in leadership. So if you're interested, I'll be posting the our emails for the course advisors team, and we would be happy to assist you with that one. All right. Thank you so
Great. Oh, I think you're muted, Marvin. Oh, good. Oh, good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for
All
coming today. I
right.
really, really appreciate everyone's engagement and discussion, and I hope you found it
Yep.
valuable. Yeah.
Yep. So for everyone who's asking for their certificates, so here's the code. So please scan it up, and then it will lead you to the survey. After completing the survey, you will receive your certificate of attendance in a couple of days. Okay. So yeah, we still have here. What's the best to do? Masters immediately, or first go for a job, then later masters? Oh, um, I will get your information later. Why you and then we can discuss it further offline. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much. All right, cool. Thank you so much, Natalie, for sharing those information. It's been really helpful, especially with me today. So yeah. Yep, thank you so much. And for those who have attended, thank you so much for being here. So we still have our webinar after this. So if you are interested to join, so yep, we will of course see you there. Okay. Thank you so much. And I think that's it for today. Thanks, Nat.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your week. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.